Greetings, Poe fans, and welcome back to Poe Discussions. And we have a very special guest today, Chris Harrison, who is an author that we have invited to interview. And so, Chris, if you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm from North London originally, now living in sunny Bournemouth in the UK.
Okay.
Got a bit of a sort of diverse background, let's just put it that way, before I
Okay.
started writing. Ex professional basketball player, did a stint in corporate world, became a consultant, exited a business, and then decided I wanted to sort of fulfill a lifelong passion of writing, and now here I am. So I'm the author of Crooked Tales, which is a series aimed at young adults, but really spans, my readers sort of range from 12 to 70. And signed a deal with Wicked Ink Publishing a couple of years ago, and I've got three books out at the moment in that series. I've written the fourth, and that's ready to go in October,
Oh,
and I'm
nice.
currently working on the fifth. So that's me. I think each book is a love letter to a sort of subgenre that I enjoyed when I was growing up, and kind of trying to introduce some of those old tropes, reinvent them,
Mhm.
and sort of deliver them to a younger audience. So that's really what I'm doing at the moment.
That's
Very
awesome.
cool.
Yes.
Yes.
And I have read the first one, The Rising, and really enjoyed it. Can't wait to read the other ones. And even though I'm like older and not young adult, I do teach young adults. So
Oh, okay,
Mhm.
so these are great books to recommend to them as well. So
cool. Yeah, they do get progressively darker. I think
mhm.
I'm always trying to push the boundary of what's possible within that bracket.
Mhm.
I think when I was certainly the age of my son, so I've got a son who's 13, he reads them. When I was his age, I was reading Stephen King and actually Edgar Allan Poe. So so it
Okay.
was
Oh,
like
great.
so I kind of I felt there was a gap between sort of conventional young adult, or certainly my understanding of young adult, and the upper sort of limit of what's possible in horror. And so I was trying to bridge that gap, and I keep pushing that boundary with each book,
Mhm.
waiting for that tap on the shoulder from the publisher to say, "Hang on a sec, you've gone too far." But it hasn't happened yet.
Oh,
So
that's great. That's good.
yeah, so they do get darker.
Well, and I think just from hearing conversations of my students sometimes, and if they'll talk about any kind of horror movies they've seen or books they've read, they seem like they don't get as scared as much as like when I was a child, or teen.
Yeah,
I mean, Jeannie, what do you think?
Well, it's a little hard to gauge anymore because, especially from certain backgrounds, many different things scare many different people.
Yeah.
And so you can't really gauge what they will deem as scary or horrific or anything like that. And a lot of it's like a hit and miss. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. I mean, you understand being the writer of young adults how
mm,
difficult it is for that particular audience to hit and maintain and keep it going. Now, I remember from my early years, my tropes were always the detective series and the horrific. It was kind of a weird a
That is
weird
weird.
combination. But I was like you, Stephen King, Edgar Allan Poe, but at the same time, I was a Hardy Boys nut. I
oh
was
yeah,
all about the detectives, the Maltese
hmm
Falcon, all that wonderful Dick Tracy, the DC comics, all
yeah,
those, they were just wonderful to me. And
hmm
to mix those together was phenomenal because that's what I found with when Franklin W. Dixon started garnering his stories, when they started getting upper, he started more to the mixture of the detective horror.
Mm.
He was bringing in a lot of the Scooby-Doo kind of thing
Yeah, yeah,
where you crossed
yeah,
over. So, and in today's world with the young adults, with the amount of social media, it's kind of difficult because it's so apathetic because they can see things and they don't touch them with reality, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
yeah. They're seeing them through a lens, aren't they? Um,
Exactly.
yeah, it's a very strange thing. I mean, I tend to use my son as a bit of a crash test dummy.
Hmm.
And then if I get a reaction from him, I think, right, okay, I'm onto something there because he's not easily scared.
Okay.
Perhaps no more than I was when I was his age. I don't know. I think when I was younger, although horror wasn't as accessible, I think there
Mhm.
was kind of a naivety around censorship and around what
Mhm.
age you should be exposed to certain things. Certainly, as far as my parents were concerned,
Yeah.
I was in there watching Evil Dead and The Exorcist and all sorts at a very young age. And I think you're right with social media. Anyone can access that stuff now. Anyone can access snippets of that stuff. Although out of context, the kind of shock factor of it has waned.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so it's important just to keep. I think what I do is I try and look at those things that scared me, well, not scared me, but got under my skin,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and then just try and reinvent them or repurpose them for a modern audience. So there are contemporary aspects to what's going on, but there is still that kind of Scooby-Doo undercurrent of, five
Yeah.
kids in a haunted house trying to solve a
Yeah.
mystery.
Hmm.
And that mystery takes its twists and turns with each book, but I'm always looking at ways to wrong foot people the way you would in a detective novel, red
Mhm.
herrings and all that sort of stuff. So you're trying to sew that in because I think the other thing is the kids have kind of when they've seen it all, they guess everything,
Yeah.
beat
Hmm.
you to the punchline, which is really frustrating. So
Mhm.
yeah, so that's kind of what I'm always working towards is how do I wrong foot people, catch them unawares, turn tropes on their heads,
Hmm.
um, and just but also keep people hooked and
Mhm.
interested. So
Yeah.
it's not just a chain of scares that are sort of loosely thread together as a lot that goes into sort of character development as well. Because I think that was my other angle with certainly with kids was how do I get them to care about
Mhm.
what's happening
Hmm.
because of this sort of desensitization to
Mhm.
horror and when you turn the news on these days and it's everywhere.
Oh, I know. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, much like you, I grew up on DC, so my dad kind of gave me a steady supply of Batman comics when I was a kid, when Batman was a detective, and it's
Hmm.
all very dark. And
Yeah.
I trace my sort of horror interest or origins back to those comics,
Mhm.
the early ones, certainly the early ones. Um, but he also kind of force-fed me a steady diet of sci-fi, so I watched
Yeah.
lots of Star Trek when I was a kid.
Oh, yes. Love
You
that.
know, the original with sort of William Shatner, and
Oh, yeah.
as a
Yes.
kid, even within a couple of episodes, it didn't take you long to spot, oh, there's a guy in red who I've never seen before who's going to die.
Yes.
And so I didn't, I didn't want to do that in books.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I wanted everyone to matter and everyone to be, but also equally everyone to be at risk as well.
Mhm.
And so, that it's just looking at those little tools and devices to keep people on their toes and keep them invested, but also keep them guessing.
Hmm.
Yeah. And this is where you kind of lean into the Edgar Allan Poe psychological, where instead of just looking at his horror, you're actually going, he always liked to dig in and get into that
Yeah.
psyche of the reader so he can really get to them and hit them harder. So that's kind of where you're going with that to help build the horror and the young adult. Because you like you said, and we've said, the apathy and the audience is so ingrained to see things, you kind of have to sneak it in on them. So is that kind
Yeah.
of where you're building from?
Yeah, oh, definitely. And it is a lot harder to tap into, like you say, because there's this sort of I've seen that. I've seen it 100 times,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
or I'm playing it on games. You look at the video game culture as well. It's everywhere. So there's definitely a growing aspect of psychological um, horror and thriller as well. As the series progresses. I mean, book three is almost entirely psychological.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
and so, it kind of taps into a lot of feelings of paranoia, mistrust
Mhm.
amongst friends, you know, lots of sort of earth-shattering revelations that get uncovered,
Mm-hmm.
and just, so suddenly you can't trust the main characters anymore, and you can't trust their perspective anymore because they don't trust themselves. So it was very much a conscious effort on my part to try and sew that in, but I think it's building blocks, isn't it? When you're writing a series, you've got to. I can't do all that from day one. You kind of gradually introducing the characters, expanding the world, expanding their
Right.
personalities,
Mm-hmm.
and hoping that you're hooking people in to come back and root for people or root against, depending on where they sit. So,
Absolutely.
um, but yeah, Children of the Shadows, which is book three, is entirely psychological, and it was a conscious shift. And it kind of, I guess, it has a lot of aspects of Poe. Um, it borrowed heavily from things that kind of unsettled me as a child, like the Wicker Man and
Mm-hmm.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This whole
Right.
sort of paranoia and not knowing if you can trust anything you're seeing or hearing. So yeah, that was a lot of fun to do, and it's something that's kind of stuck with the rest of the series as a result. It's
Okay. That
yeah,
sounds great.
even though four is a slasher at heart, it's still
Right.
got that mystery around it in terms of, right, who's double crossing who? Do we trust?
Mm-hmm.
Are we? Everyone's up to no good,
Yeah.
and has hidden agendas. So by bringing that in, it just, again, I kind of, I mean, Dawn of the Demon, which is book four, is out in October, but it was very much it was always designed to be a slasher. There's a serial killer involved and a mythical killer as well. So you've got two killers. But I didn't want to just go down the slasher tropes. I wanted more depth to it. And so,
Mm-hmm.
there's
Yeah.
still a lot of psychological terror involved, mystery and just dread, like a growing sense of dread throughout.
Nice.
That
Well,
sounds.
and that's another thing, like we're talking about Poe is one thing, and Carmen, when we've discussed in our unbook club and everything, Poe loved to build his characters to where you weren't totally against them or you weren't totally for them because it
Mm.
was like they were all gray. They weren't good or
Yeah.
evil. They
Mm-hmm.
always had that gray area. So is that kind of your approach when you're looking at your characters and building them?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And even the kind of most heroic central characters within the book have their grey areas and their grey moments as well. I think when I started, I didn't want to fall into this trap of creating a couple of lead characters and then some bit part players that kind of just
Mm-hmm.
made up the scenery.
Hmm.
And and so they take turns in sharing the limelight, and they also take turns in stepping up and doing certain things. And of course, I base them all on different archetypes. So
Hmm.
readers relate to different people. And
Absolutely.
Carmen, you'll probably understand that because you've read the first book, and you'll get a
Yes.
feel for the blend of characters. But
Mm-hmm.
some of those characters who you don't expect to step up do step up, and they don't always get it right. And actually, there's some serious consequences of what they do, even though
Mm-hmm.
it's coming from a good intention. Um, and I think that again is a tipping point with book three in particular, where you realize, actually, I'm not so sure they're all on the right path anymore.
Oh.
you know, from their motivations and their actions. And it blurs the lines between what's right and wrong significantly. You know, both from the eyes of the characters and also as the reader just sitting there looking across the you know the scope of the story. You just think, actually, would I have done that? I'm not so
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And that was quite drastic. So
Yeah.
without giving it away, you know, these are sort of life and death issues, but they're very morally grey as a result. And there's a protagonist, an antagonist, sorry, in the book who spells that out. You know, I have a priest that appears in the second book as a sort of a focal character,
Hmm.
and you start to hear things from the opposite side of the table, you know, in terms of what's perceived as dark. You know, with
Hmm.
darkness is defined that way by the light, who gave light that, you know,
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
insight. And so it does start to play with those perceptions of what's good and what's bad, and is there a good and bad? Is it all a mishmash of something in between? So
Hmm.
yeah, it was definitely something that factored in. Um, and continues to factor in. And in fact, some of the characters I've created that are, I say, more morally grey
Hmm.
than others have been bigger hits with readers, weirdly.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And
it is interesting.
I was going to say, speaking of characters, in the first book, you have a character who really likes Poe. So I like the way
Yeah,
you fit that in. Do you want to talk about, him just a little bit? I don't want to give
sure.
spoilers away for anybody, but
Yeah, Archie is a kind of a tiny sort of story in his own right within the book. I mean, the premise of the book is a guess what people think on the outside is a haunted house, and it has a number of rooms. And
hmm.
as you kind of go further into the book, you realize there's more to it than that. And but each of the rooms has a specific presence that I say haunts it, but we, you know, in a broader sense.
Yeah.
And so you learn about Archie and his affinity with Poe, and the fact that he's kind of scrimped and saved to buy this Poe book, that he's had his heart set on for quite some time, and he comes from a difficult background, a difficult upbringing, and so there's this element of escapism for him, but it's also a passion. He's a poet, and enjoys writing himself, and so it was an interesting, again, just giving characters depth. People, you
Mhm.
know, well, hopefully by the time you read the chapters with Archie in, you care
Right.
Yeah.
about him, because he's got that richness,
Yeah.
albeit lots of it's quite steeped in sadness and
Mhm.
adversity. You kind of you feel for him a lot.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
and Poe is the thing that kind of inadvertently leads him into this world, because when he goes to buy that book, the owner of the bookstore that he buys it from has a book that she's is not really, you know, in her wheelhouse as a bookstore, and it's a factual book about haunted houses, and she hands him that as a gift, um, and that leads him to Crooked House. But
Yes.
it's yeah, so um, yeah, so and Archie does come back. You know, Archie does turn up in book two as well. So it
Okay.
was a character that I revisit, but it was a way for me to acknowledge the roots of some of that horror and mystery without
Mhm.
um, you know, just giving it a bit of context, for new readers. You know, readers will see that and go, right, Edgar Allan Poe, let's give it a go, hopefully.
Yes.
Um, and that was always my objective, was to sow things like that in, and kind of almost educate younger readers around some of the origins of this stuff, and get them to expand their horizons a little bit.
Yeah.
uh yeah, it can feel like there's a sort of a steady conveyor belt of content that you have to consume, and sometimes it's nice just to go back, and look at the stuff that was done before, and see where
Absolutely.
some of these things came from.
Yeah, I loved it when, I got to that part, and I kind of thought that way too. It was like you are helping to teach younger kids or t young teens, preteens about Poe, and it kind of blends in because, like in the United States, Poe is kind of introduced around the seventh grade, so kids are
Mm,
around 13, and they read something of Poe up through usually their junior year when they're
right.
about 17. And so
Hmm.
those, even if you've got a reader that's a little bit younger, they're going to find Poe before they find it in
Yeah.
school. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I had a straight like my educational experience, if you like. Poe was never introduced in the UK. I don't know whether
Hmm.
it is
Mhm.
now. I'll see with my son, but I'm kind of I'm not expecting it to be. I think there was always this stigma around horror
Hmm.
and the horrific, as you called it, Jeannie,
Hmm.
within schools. Certainly for me growing up, I think my interest in that genre didn't carry into the education system, so I had to go and seek it out elsewhere.
Okay.
It was never really covered, and I remember a conversation with my English teacher. I can't remember what age I was, where he said, you need to broaden your horizons and read other material.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Because I was heavily into King and Dean Koontz and
Hmm.
James Herbert and Clive Barker and all that stuff. And I sat there thinking, actually, this is the stuff I read on my own time,
Hmm.
and I read Steinbeck, I read Shakespeare and
Yeah.
everything else, but that was in class.
Hmm.
And so I guess there was an aspect of me having to or looking to fulfill that requirement, but I couldn't do it in the education system. And even when I did, it was kind of not, I guess, frowned upon
Okay.
in a way as kind of almost like lowbrow. Don't waste your time
Interesting.
with horror. Read some more Steinbeck.
Hmm.
And I, being stubborn, I kind of dug my heels in there, and so I just carried on. I've 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 kind of developed a mantra of just proceed until apprehended. And so I just carried on and delved deeper into King and Poe. I remember, weirdly, there's a kind of a parallel with Archie's story. Although I wasn't looking for it, I found it when I found Poe. I found it in a bookshop, and it was the complete works of Poe.
Okay.
Um, and I was just drawn to it. And I think at that point, I'd read Pet Cemetery. That was my first Stephen King book from memory,
Yeah.
Pet Cemetery.
Okay.
Mm.
And I just picked up this book, and I knew instantly that I wanted it. And then from then on, I just carried that book in my school bag everywhere I went, and would just dip in and out of it whenever I got time.
Hmm.
So that was the one. Although I got through a lot of King, Barker, and all that stuff.
Hmm.
Edgar Allan Poe was always in my school bag, and that was what I carried around with me all the
Yeah.
time.
That's
And
awesome.
and it's still one of those things that you can revisit and just appreciate, the
Hmm.
like, the language and the imagery it conjures up. I loved it. So that was I guess in lots of ways, my first experience of revisiting and rereading. So
Okay.
at that age, you're just plowing through things, and
Yes.
you're going right.
Yeah.
Okay, I've read that book now. On to the next one.
Hmm.
But Poe just stayed with me.
That's awesome.
Um,
And I think some of the reasons I'm going to take from my own background here, I'm like you. When I was in school, we were, in the United States, we were introduced to just basic like poetry and using examples of Poe for literary elements, mostly,
mm,
not so much for the content. I think that's
mm,
why the only thing with the Telltale Heart, they get it at an older age.
yeah,
But at the same time, most of the time, they only hit it just for the literary elements. They're not looking at it from the whole scope of literature. And I
Yeah.
yeah, sure,
think that's not a bad thing, but I think that's why things or certain authors are not introduced in the classroom and you have to seek it out on your own.
Yeah.
And I was one of those people. I mean, VC Andrews was one of my favorites. Flowers in the Attic, all
Hmm.
that. And so along with Stephen King and Anne Rice and
Yeah.
all those, you know, they the Edgar Allan Poe whet my appetite, but I needed
Mm.
more because I needed
Yeah.
more into it, like you're talking
Sure.
about. You
Yeah.
weren't given the horror, so you had to go hunt it down. So,
Yeah, exactly. I think the closest I was given was Macbeth,
yeah.
um,
Okay. Yeah.
which I love.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's probably the closest.
Hmm.
And I as I say, I've got lots of great books that I read in school, and I kind of had a stint where I read a lot of detective novels as well
Hmm.
after a
Hmm.
period.
Hmm.
But horror is something that I just kept coming back to.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter how much of a break I gave it. It always
Yeah.
sort of called me back eventually.
Absolutely.
I remember having a break from it when I had my son as well, and I kind of lost my appetite for horror.
Yeah.
And and then after about a year or so, it just found its way back to me. So it's interesting that sort of where, sometimes I'll sit back and think, well, what is it about in terms of need fulfillment, what is that giving me?
Hmm.
Why does it keep calling me? And I see it with my son as well. He grew up with Goosebumps,
Hmm.
found them on his own, for his friends. I didn't want to push him into horror. I never
Yeah.
wanted to push him into anything, but he
Right.
Yeah.
found Goosebumps, and he's no disrespect to R.L. Stein, but he was a bit meh. That's not really scary.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and so, I think there was that stuck with me, and
Yeah.
definitely fueled Crooked Tales as I've sort of developed it and just think, right, okay, let's see if this scares you.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um, you know, and some of it has. Yeah,
Well,
it's
and one of the things that I've always found is so irritating to me is that when you ask a younger person what is horror to you, and the
mm,
first thing they say is blood and guts, and I'm like,
oh,
Yeah.
that's not
yeah,
horror, because
yeah,
as you know, writing it and everything, horror is such an encompassing genre that it's
I
not just
agree.
about slinging guts out of somebody or the amount of blood that you can put into. It's the
Yeah,
psychological, it's just delving into the deepest fears that causes a person to go, you know,
yeah.
that's the kind of thing. So when you're writing your characters, do you kind of think from your son's point of view about what is his identifying of horror to try to get you in that mindset? And how do you make it go from there? I guess is
I
what I'm
do.
asking.
Yeah, I do actually. I think my son's always been more. I don't think he's phased by gore
Hmm.
as much as he is the supernatural.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and so I've always kept and maintained a supernatural element to most of what I've been working on. And I think it's an interesting thing because with the characters, I'm kind of I'm what's known as a planter. So I plan and I
Hmm.
Yeah.
make stuff up on the fly. And
Yeah.
I like that flexibility. I like the idea that I'm not too limited to thinking where I can't embrace a new idea as it pops in my head, when I'm in the zone, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of planning retrospectively just to make sure I don't contradict things or trip over, say the guy's got blue eyes in one book and then he's got green in the next.
Hmm.
And what I did very early on was I mapped my characters and then I mapped their phobias. And
Okay.
Nice.
I looked at the age group. I mean, unfortunately, I coach basketball. So I
Hmm.
coach my son's basketball team
Oh,
and the
cool.
age group below. So
Hmm.
Hmm.
I have access to kids in that sense. And I can sort of see, right, what's scaring them, what are they talking about, what are the trends, all that sort of stuff. I'm not down with the kids by any stretch, but
Yeah.
I see it. And
Yeah.
so I kind of boiled down some of the phobias to just like basic phobias that everyone had. People are scared of spiders, people are scared of heights, people are scared of drowning and things like that. And it was like, right,
Mhm.
how do I manipulate some of those things and make them scary
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
relevant? And so it was very much a back to basics exercise for me in terms of right, what really scares people. I mean, we're all, I think we're all born with something like two fears, aren't we? It's fear of falling
Mhm.
and fear of loud noises.
Yeah.
Although there's another study recently that suggests that we've also got this innate fear of snakes, weirdly. Um,
That is
uh,
interesting. I don't like snakes, so
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think there's any snakes in my books so far, but there's still time, Carmen. There's still
There you
time.
go.
So I'll just make a note of that.
Yeah. For
So
future
I'll look
reference,
for it.
snakes
Yes.
must
yeah,
appear.
at
Yes.
5, full of snakes.
Oh,
Exactly.
So I was trying to tap into some of that stuff and figure out, right, how does it affect people? Because my son don't like spiders.
No.
He just don't like them. It's a rational fear. They're tiny.
yeah.
It's huge,
Mhm.
but he just doesn't like them, and he's not alone. Um,
Hmm.
and you see him kind of, you see kids when they're watching Jaws or anything that's sort of underwater. People are like, there's a tension that grows, and it's not.
Hmm.
That's the sort of thing that I was looking to tap into more than people jumping out of closets or with
Mhm.
knives and all that sort of stuff. Or the gore. I think book 4 is gory,
Okay.
Mhm.
um, because it's a slasher
Hmm.
Yeah.
homage, if you like, but it's
Yeah.
but it's but it's not gore for gore's sake, and there's an aspect of
Yes.
that that's
Yes.
and they're in very it's more designed to deliver the stakes that are involved rather than to
Mhm.
scare. So
Hmm.
it's like, oh right, okay, there's some real danger here now.
Okay.
And it's very physical. I think, there's a lot of nightmarish aspects to the series as it starts off, and a lot of
Mhm.
dreamscape stuff.
Yes.
And so the slasher aspect was very much in the real world, and it became a very real and physical threat.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So it was important to sort of deliver that in a way that slasher fans would go, oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Look at that. Look at that
Absolutely.
unbelievably creative kill. But
Hmm.
it wasn't with the aim of scaring. It was the aim of suggesting actually the stakes are high now. You
Mhm.
know, you might be kids, but you're not. We're not treating you like kids.
Hmm.
Yes.
So yeah, I think the fear aspect plays a big part, but it's not. I wouldn't ever use gore as a way of scaring people. I just don't think it has any scare value
Mhm.
I agree.
at all. In fact, I just don't. I don't. It's not something that's ever scared me, and it's not something that's ever appealed to me either. I
Hmm.
look at sort of filmmakers who've built careers on that. Eli Roth comes to mind. With Hostel and this
Mhm.
kind of shock stuff. James Wan with his sort of Saw, and that kind
Yeah.
of stuff
Yeah.
never appealed to me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm the same way.
It's just a fad. It's
Yeah.
almost
I
like a
mean,
gimmick.
Yeah.
yeah. And gore has its place in the story,
Hmm.
but it's not the story.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I think,
exactly.
yeah, and that I
If
think
you,
that's one
yeah,
of the things a lot of writers get wrong.
Yes.
yes,
So,
definitely. It
Hmm.
yeah,
becomes the story. And
ex
I never ever want anything to be just a chain of scenes that I think are going to entertain. There needs to be a thread that runs through that,
Hmm.
wonderful.
which is the story. And
Mhm.
so when there is gore, in my books, it kind of makes it more impactful because people aren't expecting it, and they're like, "Oh, right,
Mhm.
okay,
Yes.
this
I
this is
agree.
serious. This is serious now."
Hmm.
Um, but I would say probably gore, as the series gets darker, gore probably only makes up 10% of the content,
Yeah.
if that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be. The rest is
Hmm.
Yeah.
threat and danger and mystery solving. There's so many mysteries in these books that,
Hmm.
um, and I've got a an author. a mutual author friend who's very switched on to mystery solving and
Mhm.
jump into the to the punchline. And
Yeah.
I always think if I'm wrong footing her, then I'm doing my job, and that's kind of where
Hmm.
I it's where I get my kicks from writing, but it's also I think where it's delivering something to younger audiences that they're not expecting.
Yes, and while I was reading The Rising, I just kept thinking to myself, I'm like, you do an amazing job of building suspense by just the words you use and just your writing style and
Thank you.
everything. And the story, definitely drew me in because I kept going, don't go to the house. Oh no, we've got to go in. It's like I felt like
Yeah.
I was a part of the group, but just an invisible, person. And so that's what I truly loved about it. And I can't wait to read the next one and continue, the rest through the series. So,
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the mystery and the mystery and the suspense, I ratchet that up with each book.
mhm.
So, if you felt that with book one, then book two will do the same.
Oh, great.
Only sort of tenfold. And it's probably a faster pace as well.
Okay,
Um,
great.
so I try and increase the pace and I expand the world, increase the mystery and increase the red herrings as well,
Oh, yeah,
which is
that's
always
awesome.
always good fun. So yeah, and I think, as I say, I'm writing book five now, which is the finale, which is quite
Okay.
um it's,
Bittersweet.
yeah, it is bittersweet. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of pressure on there on
Hmm.
my shoulders at the moment when I'm writing that, because you're thinking, right, okay. I mean, I know what's coming in book four, and no one else does. And book
Mhm.
four is like an epic mystery horror thrill ride.
Hmm.
Mhm.
It's kind of a slasher on steroids.
Yeah.
Um, I never I never wanted to go down the slasher route of the Michael Myers or the Jason Voorhees. There's sort of someone who hides behind a mask who has no personality. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was always more drawn to the killers with personality, or the killers that had a mystery behind them, like
Hmm.
so Candyman, Freddy Krueger, those sorts of characters that
Hmm.
sort of had more bite and more personality. And so there's a couple of those in this, and I kind of created a bit of a problem for myself with one of them, because I'm now very fond of that character and could quite easily write a series just
Yeah.
about that character.
Oh,
Hey,
wow.
that could be
Um,
in the future.
That's
but
Could
right.
be.
he's just the right side of unhinged to make it interesting, and is
Nice.
Okay.
unpredictable. But he's humorous as well. There's a lot of humor in what he does, even though it's really dark.
Hmm.
So yeah. But you're constantly looking at ways of how do I keep building that momentum, and now I've got to deliver the finale. And although that's mapped out in my language as a planter, um, you're constantly kind of watching it going, right, okay. I almost wanted each chapter to be land like an epic story in its
Mhm.
own right. And it's quite a lot of pressure, which I
Ah.
which is interesting, going through the writing process. You think on the fifth book it would be a lot easier, but actually this is a lot harder for some reason.
I could see that because your third book just came out. Like you said, you're the
Mhm.
only one that really knows what's happened in book four. And it's like, what are the things that, the readers have enjoyed through the series? Are they
Yeah,
going to be disappointed? Are they going to love it and want more? Yeah, that would be a very
yeah.
hard thing to think about putting down on paper.
It's very tricky as well, because book four comes out in October. By then, book five needs to be finished, and
Okay.
so you're
Mhm.
you're kind of you're handing over book five without really. No, I mean, I'd say I've got a feel for it by now, but
Mhm.
you can never count your chickens, and you just don't know what's going to resonate in book four. Is it
Right.
going to be the
Yeah.
same thing that resonates for me? And am I then pulling on the wrong strings in book five? because
Yes.
everyone's sort of, sitting there going, well, what happened to that character? Oh my God, I was loving that character. Um, so, and there's a lot of loose ends to be tied up as well within it. So it's kind of complex, and it's it's just an interesting process in comparison to the previous four.
Hmm.
Yeah.
For me as the writer, where you're sitting there going, right, okay, how is this performing against the previous entries, and is it, like you say, is it doing it justice? Is it doing the characters justice?
Hmm.
And my wife always sort of laughs because each time I write a book, I set myself a new challenge. It's almost like some mild form of self-sabotage where I'll create a
Yeah.
situation that's really difficult
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
because I then want to fathom a way out of it or a way to tell it. And so
Hmm.
I think that gives the stories a richness and an unpredictability, but it
Mhm.
makes it tough as a writer.
Yeah.
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 It will
Yeah.
definitely mess with your mind, but at the same time, I can understand how you feel where you are like, in essence, trapping yourself to
Mm,
make sure that you can find your way out or give your worst case scenario and, hopefully try to overcome it. And
Mhm.
then with this fifth book, I can imagine it's kind of like when you're packing for a trip. It's like you've got everything in the suitcase and then you go to close it and you're like, oh, wait, did I get everything? And then you start going through the checklist all over again. And then you're like,
yeah.
oh, I forgot that. Then you got to go get that and then put it in. And eventually you've got so much stuff packed in that suitcase. You're like, how long am I going to be gone? Where am I
Yeah.
going? Did I overpack? Did I underpack?
Yeah.
And I can see how that would be for a book five that's supposed to finish out this story arc. And you're like, did I hit everything? Did I get everybody?
Yeah.
And
I have a
I
little
like what you
file.
said. Yeah, I liked what you said a little earlier about how you didn't center it just on one or two characters. You kind of wanted to bring in like other characters to step up and do things. And I love that because I found that most serial books that I read, I kind of fall in love with some of the minor characters
Yeah.
Mhm.
and wish that the writer would have brought them forward and put them a little bit more because it felt like they built them to have more in the story, but they never really developed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah. No,
glad. I'm glad you did that because I can
that's
see that
cool.
because and from a teenager point of view, there are those teenagers that are in the background that they have these capabilities of doing
Yeah.
some, wonderful things, and they just kind of get overlooked. So,
Yeah. I think
yeah,
it's weird. I got strange inspiration from that from the my son watched the movie Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds a while back,
yeah,
Mhm.
where he's effectively an avatar that's sort of designed to be in the background and then finds himself
hmm,
thrust into the foreground.
Mhm.
yeah,
And there were aspects of that, and it definitely tapped into what you were saying, where you get underdeveloped storylines, character arcs that are just there as filler, or they're
hmm,
kind of the cement between the bricks, but which you never really appreciate. The focus is all on the bricks, and so
Mhm.
it was important to me, even in sort of series like Harry Potter. You've got your main characters, and then you've got other ones that are really interesting but just never get the airtime.
yeah,
Yeah.
And so I wanted to break that mold a bit.
Mhm.
Um, and I, I think I didn't go in with any, when I started, I did what felt natural rather than adhering to any rules or unwritten rules.
Mhm.
And so I've probably broken a lot of rules writing these books, but
yeah,
I love breaking new ground. And I think that's why I
hmm,
box myself in to challenges when I'm writing, is because I know if I can break out of that, it's going to be breaking new ground,
hmm,
Absolutely.
which is
Mhm.
what readers want, hopefully.
Yeah.
yep.
I
I
t-
think that's wonderful. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the way I find different writers and authors, is because I always look for that unexpected.
Mhm.
I don't follow just I mean, I go by recommendations from other people,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I want to find that's gonna attach itself to me where I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm so interested. I want to find out more.
Yeah.
Yes,
And so,
absolutely.
yeah.
I
So
agree.
I think that's why I've always got attached to Poe. Because
Yeah.
Yeah.
in every story, every poem, it's like, oh, what are we gonna do next?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And they're
Yeah.
so different as well. And and
Hmm.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
one question we always ask everyone that we talk to is, do you have a favorite Poe story or poem or both?
I think well, going back to my sort of origins, I, I like the Pit the Pendulum. Um,
Good one. Hmm.
and I also I like Telltale Heart as well. So yeah, they were the ones that I kept going back to over and over again.
Okay.
More than any others.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so they would be my recommendations, if you
Okay.
call them that, for people who
Yeah.
haven't read Poe, to
Mhm.
dip into those.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, those are both
Yeah.
really good ones. And I
Mhm.
think Telltale Heart is probably that, The Raven, or I guess
Mm,
those, Jeannie, don't you think those are the two most picked by people we've interviewed?
yeah.
Yeah, The Raven, Telltale Heart, definitely. And Annabelle Lee. I think
Yeah,
Annabelle
that's
Lee
Yeah.
would be probably the third
Mm,
highest up there.
yeah.
But I
yeah.
think that's because, unfortunately, in my opinion, some of us, those are the main ones that are always introduced, and not a lot of
Yeah.
people search
Get beyond
out
it.
more Poe,
Hmm.
Yeah.
unfortunately. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
why they stay as just their favorite picks, which there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
need to
I think,
find more Poe.
Yes.
oh, definitely. I think I had my dad was kind of force. He wasn't a massive reader.
Hmm.
He read a bit of King, I think. He recommended which became my favorite book, which is Salem's Lot. He recommended that when I was younger. But
Hmm.
he used to he used to be interested in horror when he was a kid, and he was fascinated by the Universal stuff, the Bela Lugosi and all that stuff,
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
and then the Hammer horror, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing and all that stuff. But
Oh, yeah.
he did introduce me to Poe at a lot earlier at age with Raven, Pit and the Pendulum, Mask of the Red Death,
Hmm.
House of Usher, all those things
Hmm.
Hmm.
in film format. And so, I think he could probably take some credit there for that introduction. Although he did introduce me to, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein and stuff like that as well.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Not so highbrow, but yeah, he was definitely heavily into that without necessarily reading it. And so the gothic aspect of horror,
Right.
I
Hmm.
definitely had an early introduction
Hmm.
by him, with those older movies that he'd record,
Hmm.
and we'd watch them on a Saturday morning or whatever together. Yeah.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hey, you got to get it somehow.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Chris, after you finish the fifth book, what are your writing plans, or have you thought that far ahead? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, there's another one that's coming that I can't talk about.
Okay.
Um,
Ah,
Okay.
so I've got another project after book five,
Awesome.
nice.
um, which I could so just watch the space, I guess. But
Yeah.
that will take me up into next year.
Okay.
Um, and beyond that, I've got some ideas around different series. I think people keep asking, am I going to sort of step up into adult horror?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I quite like young adult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like the accessibility of it and the fact that you're kind of introducing people
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
to a
Yeah.
genre. Um, I do have a fascination with vampires,
Yeah.
that stems
Okay.
back to my force feeding of Hammer horror. And as since been sort of, you know well, my favorite book, Salem's Lot, so which is King's
Mhm.
take on Dracula, but my second favorite book is Dracula, Bram
Okay.
Stoker's
Mhm.
Dracula. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there might be a vampire series in
Oh,
me somewhere
nice.
that
Nice.
that that shifts some of those tropes and
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
just challenges the genre a bit. Um,
Okay.
but beyond that, we'll see.
Okay. We have
All right.
lots to look forward to.
I hope so.
Now, where can just we like to ask this, where can most people find you on social media, and where can they locate your books the quickest and the best?
Sure. So social media, I'm mostly active on Instagram. That's just Chris Harrison 1975 or Chris Harrison 75, I think. I don't know,
Okay.
one of those.
Okay.
I never really pay attention to my handle on that.
Understand.
So Instagram is where I'm active most. They can find me on my website, which is chris-harrison.com.
Okay.
And the books are available everywhere they sell books. So, if that's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or Waterstones, or wherever they are,
Okay.
they can find them. And there's links to that on my website.
Mhm.
There's links to that on my Instagram page as well. And it just takes you so you can choose where you buy your books. I know some people are digital, some people are physical.
Mhm.
So whatever they are, I think all three of the books so far are on Kindle Unlimited at the moment. So people who pay
Okay.
that subscription can access it that way. But generally, it's where all books are sold. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Perfect.
Awesome. All right. Anything else you'd like to share before we wrap it up?
No, I'm good. It's been great chatting.
Yes, this
Well-
has been a great conversation.
Yeah, and thank you for joining us. We really
Yes, thank
appreciate
you.
it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And on that note, we are
Poe
out.
out.